What is the state of the Nigerian and African economies? Joining us today at INSEAD Knowledge is Mr. Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, Governor, Central Bank of Nigeria. Mr. Sanusi, give us a snapshot of the Nigerian economy.
This is an economy that's been growing in the last 6-7 years at the rate of about 7 to 8% per annum. A lot of that growth has been driven by agriculture, by wholesale and retail trade, and by services. It's about to move to the next level with the power reforms, and once it addresses the power and infrastructure problems, we'll get rapid growth in manufacturing and processing, and we do expect that to lead to double-digit growth. So it's an economy that's an oil and gas producer, the leading oil and gas producer in Africa, but oil and gas is only 11 to 12% of GDP. So the great potentials for growth actually come from things like agriculture and manufacturing and services, and there's room for a lot of diversification. 150 million people, 60% of West African GDP, and tremendous potentials for development.
What is the main attractions for foreigners to invest in Nigeria? Why should businesses invest in Nigeria?
Well, first of all, it's a large market of 150 million people, a very large base of skilled labor. The oil and gas sector, a lot of upside in processing, in agriculture. This is a country that is the #1 producer of cassava in the world, for example, which has very little in terms of production of starch and ethanol. So opportunities for innovation, opportunities for new areas, virgin territory that's not been explored.
What is your forecast for the economy?
At the moment, the National Bureau of Statistics is forecasting a growth of 8 to 8.5% in 2010. We think that if we put in the right policies, we could easily get to double digits.
How much of the Nigerian economy and the banking system has been affected by the subprime crisis?
Not by the subprime crisis directly, but certainly the second round effects of the crisis led to a crash in oil price. Remember, oil price was about $147 a barrel at one time at its peak, and then crashed about $40 a barrel. And that combined with the crisis in the Niger Delta meant that there was a collapse in government revenue and liquidity in the system. And because the asset prices in the capital market were highly correlated to the price of oil, that led to stock market crash. And then there was a bandwagon effect on the balance sheets of banks for non-performing loans and erosion of capital. So the banking crisis in Nigeria was a result of the second round effects of the global financial crisis.
China has been investing heavily in Africa. What are some of these activities, and do you see these activities in Nigeria?
Oh yes, I think the Chinese have now gone into oil and gas in Nigeria. They have always been into construction, into textiles and some manufacturing, light manufacturing. They would like to get into power and into the extractive industries. So we have seen activity by the Chinese. Obviously, China is not at this moment anywhere near being the biggest investor in the Nigerian economy. Or even the biggest trading partner for the country, but it's increasing its presence.
Who is the biggest trading partner?
The United States, and then after that, France.
What is the role of private equity in the development of Africa so that it moves away from commodities into industry?
It's critical, and I've just spoken about that at today's session. We do need to create an environment in which private equity will come and play a role. But then the incentives have to be there, and the stability has to be there. So it's basically about, for instance, if you're doing public-private partnerships, do we have appropriate laws and regulations, and is there enough confidence about the transparency and sustainability of the process and the consistency of policy? That trust is built over time, and when that is done, private equity begins to flow. At the moment, we are working on reforms, for instance, in the power sector. I think that should bring in private equity. There is a reform of the PPP framework, and that should also bring in private equity into things like transportation infrastructure, even into agriculture and agricultural and processing of agro-based industries. So that is something that's critical for development.
The world views Africa as a place which is rife with crime, poverty, poor health, poor infrastructure. Are they keeping investors away?
I don't think so. I think that these difficulties actually provide opportunities for people to come in, because they provide opportunities for addressing those issues. A place like Zimbabwe, for example, offers tremendous opportunities for investments at the moment as things improve. The same thing with Angola, same thing with Nigeria, same thing with Sierra Leone. I don't think the reality of Africa is exactly the same as the perception. Now, I think a lot of that perception is exaggerated and probably based on incomplete information. I've had many people make comments about Africa and they've never been there. They basically are making those comments based on what they heard, and maybe what they heard many years ago, and they have no idea of the amount of changes taking place. Go to places like Mozambique, go to countries like Angola, go to countries like Botswana, go to places like Ghana, go to places like Senegal. A lot is happening in terms of governance, in terms of democracy, in terms of a fight against corruption, in terms of reform. And many people simply are not aware of those changes that are happening across Africa.
What are the prospects of growth in sub-Saharan Africa?
Well, as the IMF clearly points out, Sub-Saharan Africa has been historically in the last few years and is likely to remain the second fastest zone in terms of growth in the world, just next to developing Asia. We think we can actually catch up with Asia, so the prospects are there. And Africa is actually the last unexplored territory in the world, and the potentials for growth remain.
After the Asian tigers, will it be the turn of the African lions?
Yes, and hopefully the first lion will be Nigeria.
How is Africa going to exploit this potential?
Right policies, addressing the infrastructure deficit, providing an appropriate environment and incentives for business and for capital to come in. That includes, obviously, policy consistency, political stability, fight against corruption, better efficiency in business processes, and so on. If we do that right, the same kind of things that the Asians did, that the Malaysians and the Indonesians did in order to attract investment, if we did that right, we should be able to repeat that experience.
What has been your most trying and most memorable experiences as a governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria?
I think the most trying experience, the most trying period was August last year, when I had to deal with a system on the verge of a catastrophe. And the major concern was, how do you pull the system from the brink, protect depositors, take the actions that need to be taken without totally eroding confidence. That was, I think, the most trying period. The most challenging has been, having done that, how do you then take it back to where it was, and the difficult process of fixing balance sheets, which is ongoing. So I'm in the middle of that challenge.
Mr. Sanusi, thank you for being with INSEAD Knowledge.
Thank you very much.